So friends, good afternoon, but there are still a few days left, 2 days, so to speak, until the beginning of April. I really hope Telegram won't be blocked. I really hope so. But just in case, I created a duplicate Max channel. The link is in the description. I have a feeling that half of Magulo audience will be on Telegram, but I'm no expert, so subscribe just in case. And Dimitri, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tell me, please, many are cursing now about oil prices rising, while the stock market is not so much. In general, to what extent do our monetary authorities take into account the interests of the stock market right now?
I don't think so, to be honest, because a very clear signal has been sent out. Gentlemen exporters, we are paying off our bank loans, but let's plugging the holes created by the harsh monetary policy. Well, there was no mention of a strict monetary contract, but the underlying reason for this is because there are critical payments, Various other complications, holes in balance sheets, gnawed by coal miners, and so on. And we're strengthening the banking system, not investing, not developing anything, because, well, there's no certainty that the vessel allows no certainty that any new initiatives will lead to higher prices. Though strictly speaking, the market isn't growing because the market needs certain drivers like those that open up prospects for us. Oh yeah, EMU, we've overestimated everything. Well, Novatech was probably overestimated. Rosneft was slightly overestimated. Everything else is a bit calmer. Well, I think that, frankly, in 6 months, if this continues, they'll revalue.
And what were they so worried about the banks? The SMAC Center is hinting at a banking crisis at the end of the year.
So the central bank has allowed banks not to accrue reserves. This has been the case for a year and a half or two now. Actually, the profit that's being projected is a bit inaccurate because reserves for bad debts are not accrued for those same coal miners, metallurgists, and other strategically important enterprises. And loans, for example, for enterprises with a bankruptcy moratorium are also, generally speaking, under pressure. So this oil and gas boom will save us from recession. Perhaps if it continues for another couple of months or 3, then basically we have a chance to tell everyone that the monetary policy was correct, everything was done correctly. Well, we'll see. I really hope the prices will hold for some time, and accordingly, we will avoid any troubles in terms of, well, a decline in GDP, recapitalization of banks, because basically, without a magic wand, it will be difficult.
Putting aside Armenia's comments about the elevator, the strait, and oil, how do you assess the current state of the Russian economy? Is this stagnation or adaptation?
Well, to be honest, I've long held the idea that the entire world is in stagflation. It's just that it was fairly, well, gradual and not very high, and it was achieved very simply by slightly lowering inflation. Well, that's common practice. And accordingly, our 1% growth turned into 0%, inflation was slightly higher, and so on. And we will continue to find ourselves in this situation until at least 2035, the so-called long depression, known as Mabel depression. It's been there for you since 2008, well, 20-something years, 25, 28. So there. And yeah, the problem is that the social model needs to be rebuilt, and that's impossible for the global economy to do quickly. And so actually this Iranian story and the Venezuelan one before that and the Ukrainian one before that, all this is essentially the essence of restructuring the global economy, the superstructure. And it's going hard, and it will end, well, in about 10 years, at best. So yes, we'll have 10 years, well, if not a remnant of the 1970s, then generally speaking, something close to it. So we shouldn't expect the same kind of optimism here as we had in the 2000s and even in the early 2010s, probably.
And if Nabiulina was talking about a plausible inflationary impulse after the Strait of Hormuz, does the central bank even have the room to lower the rate now?
Well, it doesn't have the room to raise the rate. And then there's a struggle to decide whether to lower it, keep it that way, and what to do about it. Well, these are just minor tactical battles. In fact, I suggest that our central bank has, so to speak, come under national jurisdiction. It's already listening more to the president and the government than to the Bank for International Settlements. That's why there's a real struggle here. Yes, for the principle that we decide for ourselves when to lower the rate. When to lower the rate. There will certainly be an impetus, but well, it'll be everywhere. And I think it could actually push inflation into the double digits in the long run if the dollar is lower, if, say, this continues for at least a couple more quarters. Because right now we're amortizing it all with accumulated reserves, but it's still impossible to stockpile, and not for 6 months. Well, China may have done that, but the rest haven't, and they don't have the storage capacity. And, well, it's technically quite difficult. So we'll have food supply issues around the end of the year. No, but yeah. Well, the main blow, by the way, isn't so much to oil as to gas, because oil can somehow be eco-exported, transported, shipped, so to speak, somehow dragged on donkeys through the mountains of Pakistan. But gas, can't, because Qatari LNG is, well, a fairly significant share of production, but a very significant share of exports in international external trade. And there's simply nothing to replace it with. Accordingly, repairing it is also impossible. The scope of repairs is also unclear because it could drag on for a couple of years. So accordingly, we are getting a very serious gas shortage, and this automatically impacts, well, practically everything from artificial intelligence to basically simply rising prices for everything, because naturally a gas shortage, rising prices, the desire to export everything, the halting of some important but unprofitable projects. So yes, an impulse for oil. Excuse me. The price boost is certainly the what's more, everyone's been expecting for a long time, because we need to make up for the management mistakes of previous years. While inflation is kind of an external issue, it's not our fault. It's force majeure. We did everything right, but that's how it turned out. So it's possible Elvira Kipsana is even saying this with satisfaction, because she's definitely not to blame. Because she fought inflation, but the Strait of Hormuz made adjustments.
Yes, with fuel, everything is individual. A friend of mine is going to Thailand. I said, well, the gas stations there are very busy. He said, on the island, I'm going to. He said that they've got enough supplies to last 2 or 3 months on that island. And anyway, he said, there's a lot of biodiesel there. Sure, trucks move slowly with it, but if you give them a nudge, they're still running on biodiesel everywhere.
Well, of course not. As long as there's a supply, that's good. Another thing is, it wouldn't have come down to horse-drawn transport. Oh, that's it. But I'm joking, of course. I hope that won't happen. Still, since they've set a toll through the Strait of Hormuz, it means they'll let you through. Well, not everyone, sometimes at a high price and sometimes at a very high price, but they'll let you through. But they'll let you, and accordingly, the problem with oil itself, well, it won't be such a catastrophic one. That said, let me remind you that during COVID, our consumption fell by 8% overall. And here, as I understand it, the impact is between 10% to 15% for oil and 20% for gas. That's a lot. We just need to understand that we haven't gotten to that mess yet. And here, if during COVID, oil prices were low and there was simply no to put them, yes, this oil for a while, then here the situation is exactly the opposite. Here, even if you really want it, you might simply have nothing and have to do, as in the 1970s, cutting consumption and so on, introducing some austerity measures, and we haven't been ready for that for quite some time. That is, the last people who remember are the Soviet people of the era of shortages, but they are also old. They have also forgotten. So yes, we are not facing a ton of different challenges and rebuilding skills, getting by, when money is not the main thing.
Yeah, connections are the main thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And a garage to store all this in plastic bottles. The video is finished, by the way. Some European woman is pouring fuel into a plastic bag, and in the UK, into plastic bags in the trunk of her. The plastic bag is from the store. She will pour the fuel out. Oh, well, just in case.
Well, I need to buy some canisters. Well, I don't know.
He doesn't have any canisters. Oh, it's flying straight in these bags. Although,
People aren't ready. People aren't ready for this. Of course they're not ready.
but what do you think, given the current situation, what's a more or less ruble exchange rate for the economy, for the market, and how realistic is it? Well, the ruble weakening scenario is now realistic.
Well, judging by the fact that it's been driven away from 86, there's an opinion that it should be in this corridor where it was last year. Accordingly, the conversation is fair like this, everyone has their own truth. Exporters have theirs, importers have theirs, but I mean, essentially, they're not letting it go beyond this corridor one way or another. 75, 85, well, like 86. There's a ruble here and there. That's probably how it will be. That is the threat of strengthening to 50 and weakening to 100 probably exists, but it's more of an extraordinary and very short-term now thing. Therefore, I think that speculation in the dollar, specifically in the dollar as a currency, is in general certainly legitimate. If you're so good at opening at the border and closing on time, then of course, that's fine, because, in my opinion, in 2 weeks, yes, it made 10 rubles. Well, everything is fine. But for some people who are more civilian and more long-term, I think simply holding for currency assets isn't the best idea right now. I'm talking about bonds and the like. Still some kind of proxy for the commodity, and if you really want currency, then buy some kind of structured bond or something on the exchange related to food, fuel, and maybe even truck or metal and metals. They might not have had their say yet this year.
Ryankovsky, I remember, said buy these crab claws and put them in the freezer. It's the best hedge against inflation.
Well, if he has a big freezer, he'd first have to buy a decent one. And industrial units are very expensive, plus electricity and storage. Electricity has become more expensive now, and frankly, I think it will get even more expensive. So the question is, can you break even because you'll pay for the electricity supply if the crab is overvalued?
Understandable. But today, the deputy head of Sverberg said that the best instrument right now to protect against inflation is a deposit. But seriously, what else can he say? Which assets are best for protecting capital right now? You just mentioned commodities. Everything related to commodities, yes. Structured products, yes. That's where we need to go, right?
Well, I think so. Yes, it does protect. Here, how can I put it? I think a good result would be simply not to lose money for the next year and a half to 2 years while this whole situation unfolds. Because if we sit in this high price environment for another couple of months, I'm saying, then we're guaranteed a recession for at least 2026 or 2027. Well, maybe in 2026, there'll still be zero, and in 2027, there'll be a recession because the lag time for this whole thing is somewhere between 9 and 12 months. So there. And so against the backdrop of recession course, a good result will be simple, yes, simply to maintain. That's why making has been difficult for a long time now, in principle. And if you want to win something, but only some, you're already increasing the level of risk. Not everyone is ready for that, I guess. So here it's just, well, I think why Super said that. Firstly, because he still wants more deposits, and secondly, well, for really large fortunes, probably, yeah. Because here at least you, well, understand that, look, I have this kind of income, so I'll do something with it. Because everything else is quite, well, an acquired taste. You have to do that. You have to do that. This is not for retirees, not for let's say, some old money and long-term holding. Well, so the question is, who was he addressing this to? That's all. It's just clear that the small depositor is sad and nervous because he wanted, well, his last pennies. I want to try to earn something there. But for small checks, there are other better opportunities, oddly enough. Well, let's say, to try to buy different products that you can quickly withdraw from, make a quick buck, so that's a different life.
Yeah, right. We've had internet outages here. I noticed Nabulina said the day before yesterday that we're not pushing the introduction of a digital ruble, but there's a card. And they were supposed to push it by the end of the year. Are these two things connected?
I think it's more connected to the concept of the digital ruble in general because it was created as an international thing driven by the bank for international settlements. Specifically, the digital ruble didn't allow for any interest, which requires, well, some rethinking. If you're not a Muslim country and you're used to deposits and interest rates, then the question arises, how can this be? Can this be? That is, it requires a very strong mental restructuring. And accordingly, given the fact that globalization is being decimated by Trump, the financial system will likely undergo significant changes. Well, we decided to take our time, so to speak, because strictly speaking, we're currently creating a digital ruble based on some kind of global logic. Well, that's within a certain ideology, and if the ideology changes, of course, everything will have to be redone, and someone will be punished for it. So I think this pause is precisely because of this, because technically I think everything has already been worked out. Well, not everything, but most of it. But it's just unclear who will be the political instigator of this issue. What do we want from this? Because it's obviously a matter of control. And who will we control? Ourselves. Okay, fine. The population. The population, it seems, is already controlled in a general way. So the concept is unclear, so, well, we decided to wait.
What's new in the high-yield bond market? It's all gone to hell.
Well, how can I put it? I think there's an interesting... Sorry, right now it's around the end of 17 when, well, the defaults died down. They're still there. There are all sorts of issues related to ongoing defaults, bankruptcy cases, rumors surrounding a number of companies, but overall, this frenzy of defaults, panic is somewhere, well, close to its peak. And accordingly, if we recall history, 17 began, it was a complete horror, but towards the end of the year, new placements slowly began to creep in. Okay. Well, actually, those were the first placements of the UDS. I think it was November of 17. Now, perhaps 26 was very similar to 17. And in 18, there was already a boom. So it's possible that right now it's time to buy things carefully with an eye on the rate cut. And so to speak, investors' appetite for risk returning. And things will be easier with the non-payment crisis, because it was the non-payment crisis that caused the most damage to SMEs. So the situation is interesting. This doesn't mean we should just buy things headlong, but overall it's time to take a closer look.
Yeah. You said that the global economy could be facing significant problems right now. Well, accordingly, demand for raw materials probably won't be very high. What do you think will happen if problems start?
Oh, of course. But we are reducing our own production. That is, if we're talking about raw material production, but not coal. We have some problems with coal and steel there, because the decline in demand there is much greater than we can, well, withstand quite comfortably. Oh, that's it. But overall production is declining, and to some extent this is even profitable for commodity companies, because if you're an oil or gas company, you're shutting down old, depleted and fields with large quantities, well, high production costs, and the price is also rising. So that's an interesting question because we could actually see some more or less decent dividends in the commodity sector. If it comes to that, if the Duma doesn't intervene again, screaming, let's introduce some kind of excess profit tax.
Yeah.
And of course, it also depends on the state of our budget because that's also an interesting question. That's why I'm quite optimistic, because if investment falls and prices rise, that generally means cash flows will be normal and will somehow cover all the previous problems, which were really big for the commodity producers. So I think it might be okay. Again, if we look at it this way, we have Rosneft, Tarnavek, and they're growing quite well.
Are there any stories happening right now in the Russian market that interest you as an investor? Like, for example, Diasov making a splash today, like how dividends just started rolling in.
Well, yes, I wasn't involved in Diasoft, but I have people there. I have Arenda, Astra, Arenda, and it seems okay. Yeah, Astra isn't showing off so much yet, but I think it'll work out. But what's the question here? The money needs to get into the economy. If it starts coming in, we're a raw material superpower after all. How is it structured? Revenue needs to come in. It doesn't matter whether it's in the form of company revenue, taxes, budget revenues, or whatever. And then it will gradually spread to other sectors. So another thing is that summer is usually considered a bad time for the market. Well, that's how it works. That's why I've just made this decision. Well, we won't increase our position there, but we will reinvest dividends. Yes, absolutely. And mainly, really, we'll strengthen the raw materials companies, which are still cheap, and, well, maybe IT, well, just with much enthusiasm. And because I don't know much about IT, I was naturally all ears. They told me something about there being prospects every now and then. It comes true. So, well, so far so good.
Yeah, you're constantly pushing me towards raw materials. I'm actually thinking maybe right now I should just buy more raw materials or something. Basically, raw materials.
I'll tell you more. If things get bad with gas in Europe now, we'll also see Nord Stream next year. And the last will become the first. Let's not overstate it. No, well, you see, it's like naturally, there's a lot of politics there. Or if you don't like political investments, then vamos. It's not your choice. Immense. But unfortunately, politics is everywhere these days. There are practically no sectors left. Well, retail used to be. But it seems like everyone has already appreciated retail, so everyone's piled in there and everything's there and the multiples there are high. That's why, unfortunately, the times here are such that politics is indispensable.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about the problems of the banks. Are you interested in Sovcombank, for example?
Well, less so for now. You know why? Because I'm still looking at TE assessments and VTB. Because Putin's statement, let's keep everything in the bank, means that you have to pay dividends however you want, right? That is, well, USA needs to be financed. Dividends need to be paid. That's it. And those investments, there are a very interesting story. They're turning into some kind of marketplace. So I checked the app, and 2/3 of it is already some kind of sale of something. Almost like Ozon there. Well, apparently they somehow decided that Ozon would come from the marketplace side, and you would invest from the bank side. So there you have it. Well, it's the same with Bonus, basically. It hasn't yet split up its product line, but nevertheless, we have these kind of trade and financial conglomerates emerging that can't tell whether they're a bank or marketplaces, and in general. Well, in that sense, it's interesting, but everything else is hard to say, because again, this classic banking script quite rightly said in 2012 will go to hell. Anyone who stays in classic banking risks of sort of losing out. And that's probably why this is happening now, because traditional banks, well, they're difficult. Not that they're unprofitable, but coming up with some kind of idea that an investor would buy outright and valuate their capital 3 times. Well, that's that, man. That's difficult. So going back to Bank, well, they'll probably survive and everything will be fine. But it's unclear why they're buying Stringglove. Because Kumechka. Well, if you're going to make money on the market price, then of course you need some kind of idea that the majority of players will believe in, and then everything will be fine. And then everything will be fine. At Bank, they're probably keeping it a secret for now, and then they'll announce it at some conference somewhere. Well, I don't know, we'll see. I'm generally listening to Kotiski for now, but so far, well, he hasn't voiced any really bright, groundbreaking ideas. I'm busy with the day-to-day.
Okay, what's new on your channel? You're slowly moving to Max.
Yeah, I'm on Max and all that, but by and large, the public isn't really keen. Anyone who wants to can sign up for Max, that's no problem. It's there. But I think everyone's still waiting for the blocking to stop, and judging by some conflicting rumors. Well, there's no firm belief that everything will be shut down. That's why people aren't rushing to do it yet. Because, well, that's understandable, because it means installing a new app again. Remembering the login and password is unnecessary. Well, basically, yes, then unnecessary step, and modern people don't like unnecessary steps, and they already have a bag full of logins and passwords. They don't remember which is which. So I think we'll stick with both for now, and time will tell which is better.
Yeah, right. I can't give an expert opinion because marketing is a young person's game. So I'm posting here and there just in case. As for what's going to happen, I have no idea. Let the experts do that. But I seriously doubt that Telegram will be given the green light because no one is going to move servers here to Russia.
Well, you know, it's already being shut down. That is, if something wants to be shut down, they just go and shut it down. If it's not being shut down, there are some underlying currents going on there, and they're probably not orphans either. And so, well,
it seems to me the goal now isn't to shut it down, but simply to limit the audience, like YouTube, so that the most inquisitive young minds know how to get in there. The less inquisitive ones gave up and went to Max.
Well, it's hard to say. I somehow,
I don't understand all this either. The main thing is, I'm very far from it, so I've been going back and forth just in case, and forgot everything.
Well, yes.
Thank you very much for the interesting interview.
Thank you.
Don't forget that you were the main speaker at my conference on July 11th.
Yes, I remember everything.